After the anesthesia from my surgery, I apparently confessed my undying love to the nurse. She just laughed, told me I had a thing with Dr. Chen and I shouldn't get too carried away. Right before I totally blacked out, I think I blurted, "We broke up. I'm so over Ethan Chen." Talk about awkward. The surgeon was Dr. Chen's mentor, and Ethan was there assisting. If the nurse hadn't come to see me later, I wouldn't have known what I'd said. Apparently, after "I'm so over Ethan Chen," I'd added, "I'm into gorgeous nurses like you now. Moi, moi." And Dr. Lee, the surgeon, totally added fuel to the fire, saying, well, looks like the little chick flew the coop. Who's the lucky fella who stole my student's girl?" Maybe because of that cheesy addition, everyone assumed I was kidding. No one believed I wouldn't like Ethan, or that we'd broken up. I guess even Ethan himself didn't believe it, because after the discharge paperwork, he took time off work to drive me home. I watched him busy himself, packing my things, and I said, looking down, "Someone's picking me up." He looked up. I already took the time off. There was a hint of annoyance, mixed with maybe something else, in his eyes. Ethan was far from a great boyfriend. If I hadn't just had surgery, he would never have thought of offering me a ride. It was like, I worked in the same business park as his hospital, and every time I asked him to pick me up, he acted all put upon. One time, he actually came to pick me up, and his little med student intern was sitting in the front seat. The front seat. That has a special meaning in a relationship, you know? Ethan is a big deal. A Johns Hopkins Medical School graduate, now working at one of the country's top hospitals. Of course, his background was impeccable. His parents were both college professors. Maybe he thought it was impolite for a friend to sit in the back. I bet his colleagues thought the same thing. And this in turn, working alongside Ethan, was definitely way more important than me. If he hadn't been picking me up, I might not have cared about another woman in his front seat. But he was picking me up. My work was a 10-minute drive. Why couldn't she have sat in the back? When we stopped, the intern offered me the front seat. I smiled and kept the door closed, stopping her. I just got in the back. It was a terrible day, for sure. I had been feeling queasy for days, and had just had a cup of soy milk. I was starving and wanted some chocolate. As I opened the wrapper, Ethan said, "Don't eat in my car." Cold, with a hint of irritation. I saw his tight jaw in the rearview mirror. The intern chirped in, trying to be cute, and told Ethan not to be so strict with his girlfriend. I got out halfway home. He didn't even ask where I was going. As soon as I was out, he took off without a second look. I never rode in Ethan's car again. This incident was like a splinter in my mind. I kept telling myself it would fade with time, but it didn't. Until last month. Ethan's little intern sent me a Venmo, saying it was for car detailing. She'd been eating an ice cream in the front seat and spilled it. A tiny spill. Some napkins would have taken care of it. She was clearly trying to be provocative, showing me she was special to Ethan. I was at home, cooking when I got that. I stared at the message and then just copied it and sent it to Ethan. "You need to set her straight." After a minute, I wrote, "Ethan, I'm breaking up with you." It wasn't an impulse. I had been considering it. I just thought that a breakup was something you did face to face. So I would wait until his vacation to break the news. The message made me realize how dumb that plan had been. He probably didn't even care about proper etiquette. I blocked all his contact information. All I took was my husky, Lucky. Ethan didn't like dogs, so I'd had to beg to keep Lucky. I thought his cuteness would win Ethan over. But dislike is just dislike. He grew to hate Lucky, and we'd argued a lot about him. Once, I was gone for 3 days on a work trip, and I'd asked Ethan to take care of Lucky. When I got back, there were mosquito larvae in his water bowl. Lucky scratched at the door like he needed to get out. It's how he tells me he needs to poop. I took him out right away. Later, when I confronted Ethan, he just rubbed his temples and didn't even want to argue. "I'm busy," he said, "you knew when you got with me, I don't have time for this." That shut down any questioning. Ethan was a busy guy. He and his mentor shared an office. Most of the patients who needed to be admitted were handled by Ethan. Every Friday, he assisted his mentor in surgery, 4 or 5 operations, all day long. Then he had to monitor the patients afterwards. If everything was okay, they'd go home in 3 to 4 days, and it all started again. It was a weekly cycle. I actually met him when my mom had her gallbladder taken out, and he was in charge of the whole thing. She told me he said nice things about me, calling me a dutiful daughter. After a follow-up, she got his number and set us up. When she was in the hospital, I thought Ethan was great. So patient, kind, and gentle. People came from all over, with their confusing accents. Some of them didn't speak English at all. And Ethan just understood them. They would ask the same questions over and over, and he explained everything every single time. But after we got together, I started to feel neglected, and I kept thinking that if he treated me like he treated his patients, I wouldn't have been so disappointed. Now, the decision was made. No regrets. Ethan could be a great guy, but he wasn't for me. Do you remember we broke up? I slowly sat up in bed, wearing my hospital slippers. It wasn't by choice that I had gallbladder surgery at Ethan's hospital. The cause was gallstones and a bad infection. I did the checkup in another hospital. The doctor suggested I have it removed right away. It wasn't a big deal. My mom had the same thing done, and if you were healthy, you could get up and move around within 3 days of the operation. Still, you needed someone by your side, so I brought my mom. I specifically told her not to bother Ethan. That he and I were done. Of course, she ignored me. She took my scans to Ethan, and they switched my hospital transfer. I didn't want to, but she started sobbing in the hallway. I felt so angry. I was going to just let her cry. But then Ethan came over, and she got up and started complaining about how I was difficult, how I was bad-tempered. She trashed me and then immediately said the nicest things about me. How gentle and kind I was, that I would be a good wife and mother. I knew then what she was doing. She didn't want me and Ethan to break up. I mean, he was wealthy, a doctor, and that made her feel fancy. I couldn't stand that kind of thinking. That my mom would put me down just to make another guy think better of me. I'd felt nauseated with all that, so I just gave up. I was too weak to deal with it. I just wanted to get better. Today, it was over. It was just follow-ups from here on. When I asked him that question, Ethan's annoyance was really obvious. He said, "Don't be dramatic." He said, "I'll make time for you when I'm not so busy." It was like that joke. The guy says to the girl, "I'll marry you after I graduate from Harvard." The girl says, "Just say you wanna break up." Ethan was a doctor. When was he ever not going to be busy? Even when he had a day off, he would lock himself up and write for his research. I told myself I needed to be understanding of his career when we got together. I did, too. I was dedicated to my job. I always made his life easier. A young guy came into my room. The guy who was picking me up had arrived. I couldn't understand why Ethan wouldn't let go, if he didn't care. I was just tired of being the only one putting in the effort. I grabbed the other guy's arm and, looking at Ethan, I said, "This isn't drama. It's a well-considered decision. If you knew me at all, you'd know I'm never impulsive. Ethan, this is my new boyfriend, Kyle Young." I wasn't the kind of person to just hop into another relationship, but I needed to show Ethan. Kyle was there to help me do that. Ethan's little intern had given me so much grief. I just needed to show him how it felt. But as soon as I said it, I regretted it. I felt Kyle's arm tense up. Luckily, he didn't call me out. He just smiled, "I'll grab the bags." Ethan frowned, and I couldn't tell if he was jealous or not. Then, the faint pain from the surgery pulled me back to reality. I was so angry with myself for acting so immaturely. Calm down, I told myself, what are you even hoping to gain from this? I took a few steps back, showing my exhaustion. That's about it, Dr. Chen. Thanks for the surgery. I really didn't want to come to this hospital, so sorry. I hope we never have to meet again. My things had doubled, now that I was leaving. Kyle couldn't carry it all in one trip. And he wouldn't let me carry anything, so I was stuck there with Ethan. I knew that I needed to leave. When I was halfway to the door, Ethan said, "You told your mom to tell me to pick you up. You thought that meant we were good again," he added after a pause. I looked back at him, surprised. I had said that, to make my mom go home, that's all. The whole time I was in the hospital, even when I'd been in excruciating pain after surgery, my mother couldn't stop talking about Ethan. She kept going on about how I needed to get over myself and make up with him. Then, she would gossip around the hospital, telling anyone who would listen that her daughter was dating Dr. Ethan Chen. She was so proud of herself. I got mad every time, and she just didn't care. So I told her that Ethan would take care of everything, hoping she'd go home. She was happy to dump me on Ethan and took off. I couldn't believe that Ethan actually believed me. "Oh, you heard that? So, you believed me, but you didn't think I'd contact you directly to ask for a ride? Very Schrodinger's ride." I smiled at him. For the 6 months Ethan and I were together, I always felt like he was incredibly clueless when it came to dating. I thought that he was emotionally slow, because he was a genius in every other way. Then, right before we broke up, I realized that he wasn't slow, he just didn't want to be there for me. Like now. He probably knew what I'd told my mom was just to get her out of my life. He probably wanted to make up, but he didn't want to put in the effort. So, he came up with a half-baked excuse to let it all go. It's all good, I thought to myself, don't make it bigger than it is. He probably didn't think we were equals emotionally. He was silent, and I was getting ready to leave when he said, "When Jenny ate in my car, it was because she was on a night shift. She was low blood sugar. She hadn't eaten in a long time." How ironic that he was suddenly giving me an explanation. I leaned against the door frame and said, "So, did you see that she did it to make me jealous?" Ethan stared for a while. "I'll stay away from her." I smiled. "Why are you starting now? Why couldn't you have done it before? Why did she keep on asking for rides when she knew that her colleague was dating someone? We're in a city with public transportation, the bus runs 24/7, taxis queue at the gate of your hospital. Is it so hard for her to take a bus or something? It's just, you gave her that idea that she had something special." He cut me off. Jenny was having a low blood sugar attack. He was acting like I was just mad about that one time. I was mad at everything that came before. Love is in the details. And he never paid attention to them. "So, low blood sugar is a get-out-of-jail card now?" I licked my dry lips. "The day you told me not to eat a candy in your car, I hadn't eaten anything all day either. You should know that I had been feeling nauseous for days. I couldn't eat much, so I didn't feel hungry. I was lightheaded after getting in your car. I wanted a piece of chocolate. You didn't let me eat it. I was so uncomfortable and dizzy, I had to bite my tongue to stay conscious. I had to wait until the last minute just to get you to stop. Do you know why?" I was staring at him. I saw the surprise, guilt, and confusion in his eyes. My nose began to hurt, tears were forming. "I did that because you couldn't pull over anywhere on the highway. I didn't want you to get a ticket." I looked down at the ground, then back at Ethan. A laugh escaped from my mouth. This laugh was worse than crying. My voice cracked. "Even then, I was thinking about you. I was so stupidly in love. Ethan, when I loved you, I really loved you. I wanted the best for you. I wanted you to be healthy, happy, and for you not to have any hardships in life." All these tiny details kept popping up, telling me Ethan didn't care about me. I couldn't hold it in anymore. I ran out and bumped into someone. It was Kyle. I am sorry, I muttered, not sure if I was apologizing for using him or just running into him. He hugged me tight and rubbed my head, cry for him just this last time. I knew Kyle from a long time ago. I was taking a break between college semesters when my high school freshman cousin told me some senior had been bothering her and asked me to go teach him a lesson. I'd taken some self-defense classes, but I knew they wouldn't stand up to any high schooler. I was about to call the police, but she hadn't told her parents. I knew that she'd mustered the courage to talk to me, and I didn't want to let her down. So I agreed to confront him. I managed to pin him against the wall. Just as I was about to have a talk with him, my cousin, acting tough, said, "Hey, if you give me your number, I'll ask my sister to let you go." I couldn't believe it. My sweet cousin was not supposed to be like that. She just wanted the guy's number. She'd used me. When the guy laughed at my cousin, she said, "You're tough. You can either give me the number or my sister will kick your ass." I could have kicked her ass. I let the guy go right away and apologized profusely. Then, I dragged my cousin away by her ear. She just wanted to get a date out of it. I was furious. When I was back home, my uncle stopped by for dinner. He and my aunt had been divorced since I was in middle school. My cousin lived with my aunt. I told my uncle what happened. I told him my cousin's actions were completely unacceptable. He listened to me, ate nothing, and then took my dad's Seven Wolves brand belt from the sofa. The guy my cousin had been harassing was Kyle. Later, we crossed paths again because he took down my tutoring poster. Kyle wanted me to tutor him in high school math and science. I pointed at the sign. It said I tutored middle school math and science. I was just a regular college student. I knew my limits. How could I tutor someone in advanced science? But he begged me, acting all pitiful. I gave in. He was an orphan, his dad didn't care, and teachers ignored him. Plus, I'd just beaten him up. I figured if I worked hard enough, maybe he could do well. With his looks and a good education, he could kill it. So I started prepping for him, staying up all night. I kept telling myself, if I had tried this hard in high school, I might have gone to an Ivy League. I helped him for a year. Whenever he had questions, I was always there. I got my teaching certificate on the first try, thanks to him. When he graduated, I asked him how it went. He just shrugged and said it's okay. He sounded sad. Every time I tried to bring it up, he changed the subject. I thought he didn't do as well as he'd hoped. I didn't ask further. I didn't want to hurt his feelings. When I graduated, I started to look for jobs around my college. I applied to different places. I didn't like the offers. It took me almost 2 months to go home. I remembered the high school. They always put the results of the college entrance exams on the door. The school had a 98% acceptance rate. Kyle was at the top. He'd done well. He'd been the valedictorian of his class. I asked some students, and they told me Kyle had been the top student of the whole school. The principal had said, Kyle would be the first one in 10 years to go to Harvard. And he did. He'd scored 706 points, making him the top student in the whole district, 9th in the state. That lying cheater. If I could get 700 points, the school principal would be begging me to teach for him. I blocked his contact. I promised myself I never wanted to see him again. I had moved on. But after 3 months of working in a city, that guy became my boss. I was screwed. Every time he saw me, he would try to apologize, making his eyes all red. It made me look like the bad guy. We patched things up. Then, I needed surgery and I needed a place for Lucky. In a city, I had no friends or relatives. My colleagues were just that. I was sure that even Ethan wouldn't take care of Lucky for me. What choice did I have? My mom hated me spending $1,000 every month to feed a dog. She wanted to sell it. I'd considered a pet hotel, but I knew Lucky would cause damage, and I couldn't afford the repair costs. So I asked Kyle. He loved animals. He would feed stray cats and pay for their vet visits. It made me feel bad for asking him for tutoring fees. I told him that if he took care of my dog, I would forgive him for lying to me. Kyle carried my bags and helped me to his car. The window rolled down. Lucky was staring at me with his silly expression. He was wearing sunglasses, a gold chain, and an old t-shirt that said, "Forever Young." He was such a dork. I started thinking about the pictures that Kyle had sent me from the hospital of Lucky pretending to smoke cigarettes. He looked even fatter than before I'd gone to the hospital. "You're spoiling him," I told Kyle. Lucky used to stare blankly at me. Now, dressed in ridiculous outfits, he looked even more ridiculous. Kyle threw the bags in the trunk. "Am I?" he said. Then he started bowing to Lucky. "Lucky, you waited for me." I rolled my eyes. The backseat was padded with a super soft blanket and cushions. Kyle made me sit in the back, not letting me wear my seatbelt. He didn't want the tension from the seatbelt to hurt my surgery scars. As we drove, Kyle's car drove next to Ethan's. Then they stopped at the same light. I tried not to pay attention, I even rolled up the window. But Lucky started doing his look at me, "I'm the best thing at Ethan." And then he started howling like a wolf. He was clearly showing off his freedom. Lucky had been through a lot with Ethan, so he didn't like him. I'd wanted Ethan to drive me and Lucky to the vet once. He said, "I don't like animals in my car, they're dirty." I told him, "Lucky's very clean, I always wipe his paws. He won't make a mess." He just said, "Sorry, no." Ethan wasn't a neat freak, and he wasn't allergic to dog hair. He just wouldn't do it for me. I tried to tell myself that it's okay, that some people didn't like animals, and we should all respect that. We should respect each other in a relationship. But then, I went to meet his parents. His mom had a Samoyed. It was beautiful and gentle. It would rub against Ethan's leg as he sat on the couch. Ethan would pet it. Nothing too fancy, but it made me realize Ethan didn't hate all dogs. That coldness of Ethan made Lucky not like him. We lived together, and Lucky went from being hyper to being quiet. He would retreat into his crate every time Ethan came home. He didn't want to bother him. Dogs are smart. He knew I was unhappy. He was trying to make me feel better. He thought that he caused our breakup. Seeing him so sassy, I started to cry again. Woo wwoo woo woo woo. The sound of his cries got to me. "Lucky, shut up," I yelled. Kyle patted his back during a red light. "Hang in there, buddy. We'll get you some ice cream when we get home." A week later, my stitches were removed. I wanted to rest up for 2 more days, and then go back to work. The doorbell rang, and I was expecting Kyle to come and take Lucky out. I was still too weak to go for long walks with him. I opened the door. It was Ethan. He had brought some fruit, bananas, grapes, and some little oranges. "You haven't gone to get your stitches taken out," he said. "I did," I said, then added, "I went to the other hospital." I didn't want anything to do with him. Ex-lovers are like the dead, they shouldn't be in each other's lives. All of Ethan's colleagues had been to his apartment for parties, so they knew me. If I went back to the hospital, I was sure they would make sure that we talked again. They would help. It was annoying. I didn't step aside to let him in. I looked at him, waiting for him to speak, and finally, I had to say it, "Did you come to see me?" He didn't reply. "You've seen me now, so you can go. You don't need to leave the stuff here." He looked surprised. He wasn't wearing his glasses, and he looked somewhat gentle. "It's just a visit. Can't I even leave some fruit?" he said. I looked at his hands. I thought about it. I started laughing a little. "When we lived together, you didn't worry about groceries at all. You would eat whatever was there. If there was nothing, you just ordered takeout. You were easy to please, I liked that." When I looked at his eyes, I felt like he was happy, maybe because of my compliment. Then I said we really weren't meant to be together. I'm picky. I hate bananas. The smell makes me feel sick. If you had cared a little bit about me, you'd know I don't really eat fruits. Sometimes I buy some to feed Lucky. My mom would say to me, when you're an adult, you should just speak your mind. Don't make people guess what you want, because they're busy. Do you remember one time your colleagues came over and brought all that fruit? I told you that I didn't like fruits. They'd just spoil at home, so you should just take it to your office. His hand on the plastic bag tightened. I actually felt like I was winning this. Sorry, I don't remember, he said quietly. But you remember everything, right? You remember everything about your patients. You never make mistakes. I asked him, you didn't care about fruits, you liked your eggs with a hint of sweetness, you liked seafood steamed, you liked beef more than pork. You didn't eat a lot of organ meat. I thought that because you never cooked, you wouldn't realize what I didn't like to eat. But then, we always ate out, we had hot pot, barbecue, small eats, or casseroles. Every time I got my boba tea, it was unsweetened green tea. And you were next to me when I told the waitresses, jasmine tea, no sugar, light ice, but then, you order me a red bean boba tea, the most sugary drink from the chain store that I don't like. But at least you got the ice right. You knew I can drink it during my periods. I looked down at my lap, then gave myself a laugh. I finally knew why I wanted to break up that time. That day, after I got my red bean boba tea, I knew. I'd said that I wanted hot pot because I was on my period. He'd heard hot pot. He thought I should be able to eat and drink like I always did because I didn't have cramps. But when you are in love, you want to be pampered and taken care of. Even if all that is just saying, drink more hot water. I had never told Ethan I didn't mind cold drinks. Kyle and Lucky hadn't arrived yet. Lucky rushed out with his leash, sniffed Ethan. Then, he stood in front of Ethan and pushed him. It was his way of telling him to leave. Ethan had worn a white outfit. Now, it had paw prints all over it. I stopped Kyle when he was about to offer Ethan a tissue. I said to Ethan, can you please leave me alone? After breaking up, can you just stay out of my life? I'm begging you. Then I added, even my dog knows that you are a bad person. Ethan started showing up after work, bringing me my jasmine tea. He kept apologizing. He listened to me say terrible things about him. He never brought any other women in his car, and he was okay with me eating all sorts of unhealthy food in his car. I swiped Kyle's message, saying we should do another fake dating thing away, and looked at Ethan. It's weird. You only started caring about me after we broke up, I said. He didn't argue. He just gave me a bag of medicine for my cold. It had been raining, and I was probably sniffling a lot. I looked at the bag and I chuckled, it's disgusting how your thoughtfulness comes now. I had been feeling sick for a few days before. I thought I had an upset stomach, so I took some medication from the pharmacy. After a week, things were worse. I started pooping dark stuff. When I went to see the specialist, I ran into Ethan and his mentor, with a crowd of medical staff following them. When he saw me, he said, frowning, I told you to not come to my hospital. I smiled, then I showed him my check-in ticket. His mentor asked, what's wrong? What are your symptoms? I told him. Dark stool, right? I remember you taking some medicine when we went to your house last time. What was it? Stomach medicine. Do you remember the name? Bismuth. Have you had these symptoms before? No. A few questions later, Ethan's mentor said, bismuth can make your stool black, and with long-term use, it can also turn your tongue black. You don't have to worry about it. Stop for a few days. If the symptoms don't go away, you can always go see a GI doctor. I saw that your right upper abdomen is not okay. Have you had an ultrasound yet? I shook my head. He told me to see another specialist in the liver or gallbladder department. When I turned to leave, I saw Ethan and his intern. I couldn't help but notice how patient he was with her. It hurt. Last night, after looking it up online, I was terrified that I had something really bad. I'd asked Ethan. He told me it's probably an internal hemorrhage, you should do an endoscope. He had no idea the pills I had been taking turned my stool dark. I didn't do my checkup at his hospital. I wanted to know if Ethan cared that I might be sick. He came home late. After washing, he just went to bed. The next morning, I didn't make him breakfast. He didn't care. Then he remembered I'd gone to the hospital the day before and asked what had happened. I said, "You can ask that doctor at the hospital. You are in the same department." He said that it wasn't okay for doctors to give out patient information. "Why didn't you call me last night?" I asked. He said he had a bunch of emergencies and he was really busy. Too busy to send me a message. It's normal for couples to fight. We fought a few times. We would usually just ignore it for a few days and act like nothing ever happened. But it was the first time I cried in front of Ethan. I told him, "You remembered that your mentor had high blood sugar, and I had to make his dishes less sweet. You remember your intern's upset stomach, and you told me to make her some hot milk. During the party, you didn't ask me anything after I stopped eating, you didn't see me in the kitchen, taking my medicine. My boss called me and yelled at me, and when your intern offered you her car keys because she had had a drink, you just drove her home. Ethan, I'm your girlfriend. What am I to you?" I let it all out. He stared blankly, then apologized. He even gave me some expensive skincare products. That's why people say, it's best to live with someone before getting married. At first, I was at home and Ethan was in a city. We would meet up every weekend. Long distance makes things look way better. He replied to my messages, sent me popular makeup for holidays, and made sure I had an itinerary and a hotel. But that was it. He barely contacted me, he did not care about what I liked or didn't like, he would arrange the same things every time. I told myself that he was just too busy. I had lived in their hospital with my mom, so I knew how it felt for doctors. He was new at the hospital he was studying. He put all of his time into his career. Then we lived together. I finally realized that he didn't love me. Why would anyone get into a relationship if they didn't care? It took me a long time to understand that Ethan just wanted a wife. His career was definitely going up, and he needed someone to take care of the house. When we met, he saw that I was gentle, dutiful, and could work. His parents thought the same. 3 months after we started seeing each other, I went to meet his parents. He didn't seem to like my country background. He said he'd rather I settled in a city. I was so nervous going to meet his family, I was so scared of them not liking me. I knew we were from different worlds. If we were to get married, my family would keep talking about how I married up. It's okay, I would just roll my eyes at them. To my surprise, they liked me and asked us to get married right away. They said we could do everything in my hometown. I was so happy that they were so nice. Then, I heard Ethan's aunt and mother in the kitchen. His aunt said my education and family weren't great. She wondered why his mom would want me as her daughter-in-law. Her answer wasn't too bad, but I still got upset. It was as if, because I was of lower status, Ethan could treat me any way he wanted. I was average, but I was a good caretaker. They didn't want a career woman. They wanted a housewife. Ethan was always busy. When he went home, he would not even be able to cook for himself. They didn't want their kid to eat microwave dinners all the time. After they were done with the chores in the kitchen, Ethan's aunt took my hand and asked if I could cook. It was rude to ask a girl that, so she was the bad guy in this scenario. But families are like this. I hate my mother and don't want to be like her, but I would find myself repeating her words. I know it is wrong, so I would reflect and change. What if they thought their opinions were right? Ethan was never going to change for me. He never respected me. Marriage to him was just about getting things done, so he needed someone to please his parents. It hurt, but my mom had told me to be a good girl and to be helpful. My family and my boyfriend's family wanted me to focus on my family and my kids. No one cared if I wanted a career or if I wanted to make money so I could feed my dog and travel. I was upset that I really fell in love with Ethan. But I couldn't let myself become Ethan's puppet. So I quit my job and went to a city to follow my dreams. I wanted Ethan to know that I could be successful too. I didn't want to be a housewife. He could be with me because I was kind, strong, and happy, not just because I was a good wife candidate. It didn't work. I thought I had so many good things about me, but it was nothing to him. Maybe there were so many wonderful women around him. I was ordinary. No matter how hard I tried, I would never be that amazing woman. Ethan's persistence surprised me. He would give me gifts that I'd throw in the trash, he would try to drive me home, and I would say horrible things to him. But he kept trying, and he would look at me everywhere we went. A few days ago, I saw his intern at the subway. She was surrounded by a huge crowd. She was pouting. She was trying to get Ethan's attention. Ethan didn't even look at her. Good-looking people always have a fault. He knew how to turn women down, but he didn't want to do it for me. I didn't care, I was staring at the ground. I was ready for a fight. If anyone dared to step on my foot without apologizing, I'd stomp on their shoe with my size 8 foot and kick it across the subway platform. After getting off the subway, I just walked away. Ethan had been trying to win me back for so long, he must have been getting impatient. He grabbed my arm. He was looking a little annoyed. "Can't we just talk?" he asked. What was there to talk about? How he couldn't give me what I needed? "My shoelace is untied, Ethan," I replied. He looked down and saw that it was. He let go of me, but didn't do anything else. I stared at him and smirked. Just as I was about to bend down, Kyle appeared out of nowhere, pulled me upright, and got down on one knee to tie my shoelace. After he finished, he said, "Your surgery scar isn't fully healed, you shouldn't bend down. It'll hurt." Then he looked at Ethan, his eyes burning with controlled anger. A liver and gallbladder surgeon should know where his patient's surgery scars are. Ethan's face turned pale. After that, Ethan just stopped bothering me. I thought he'd given up. Then, I got a call from my mom, and that just made me hate his actions even more. She started yelling at me, telling me everything was my fault. She told me that I should be grateful that Ethan was with me. Then she went on and on about how hard Ethan worked, and I should be understanding. I told her, "Mom, people who grow up to do great work, their parents have already set them up for life." It wasn't easy for him to be a doctor. It wasn't easy for me either, working in a city with high costs of living. Why didn't she care about me? Stop with all that. You are not in any trouble, you live off the kindness of others. You can't even save money. What's the point of you? My mom had been like this for a long time. She thought all girls should be housewives. I had grown up listening to her say, "If you can't work, no one's going to want you." But the internet told me that she was wrong. Not all moms did this to their kids. Before I went to a city, I wasn't planning on living with Ethan. I'd even rented a place. But after my landlord harassed me, Ethan asked me to live with him. I couldn't find a pet-friendly hotel. I didn't want to get rid of Lucky. Ethan didn't ask for rent. I was not okay with it, so I paid for our groceries and household supplies. I made sure he always had his skincare and everyday necessities. He used $70 face wash, $40 shampoo, and $30 toothpaste. I didn't think it was too expensive. It was definitely cheap compared to the rent in the city center. Okay, maybe I did take advantage of him. Lucky had destroyed the sofa in his apartment. I wanted to replace it, but he said not to. So, I bought him a nice shirt, costing a few $100s. I felt horrible. I started crying. I wasn't trying to get attention, but my mom did not care. She started yelling at me again. Stop crying. Are you trying to punish me? You are so difficult. Don't be stupid. I will be there next week with your dad to talk to Ethan's family about getting married. Be ready for it. Don't mess this up. I hung up the phone and had a panic attack. Why were they trying to set up a marriage contract? It felt like selling a daughter. I made a drastic decision. I collected all the messages and photos between Ethan and Jenny and made a timeline, then I put them all online. Jenny had sent me a Venmo for the car cleaning after the ice cream incident, but she had also lost other things in his car: a watch, a hair clip, a hair tie, clear nail polish, a lipstick-stained face mask. Every time she rode with Ethan, she would leave her strong, flirty perfume lingering in the air. Doctors weren't supposed to wear perfume at work. She was clearly going out of her way to leave this kind of scent on a married man. And then there was the time after the party when Ethan drove her home. I'd taken an Uber and followed them. I saw her, pretending to be drunk, throw herself into Ethan's arms, trying to kiss him. Ethan pushed her away immediately. But why did he drive her at all? On top of that, Jenny was always posting vague things on social media. She and Ethan were with the same mentor. Ethan had been at the hospital longer, so he was responsible for teaching her the basics. I used to send Ethan all these screenshots, asking him why they were doing these things. Each time he'd say he'd handle it, but he never did. It was like she was just doing all this because Ethan allowed it. To get the story out there, I spent some money to boost its exposure, contacting several news outlets. People online were quick to judge. Many of them were former patients of the hospital. Wait, Dr. Chen is a good guy. He was in charge of my stay, and he was so nice. And super professional. Well, looks can be deceiving. Disgusting. Just horrible people. May they find each other and be awful together. Ethan's career was probably over. His parents called me, asking what was going on. I hung up. I threw my SIM card into the toilet, packed my bags, and got ready to take Lucky and go far away. My parents were country folks who didn't use social media much. When they came to visit to discuss the wedding, they'd get rejected and screamed at. Good. I didn't have any sympathy for that family anymore. I'd never go back. I would go to some quiet place and live my own life. I wasn't going to be a dutiful daughter. I wasn't going to be a housewife. I was just going to work hard and feed Lucky. I was packing up when I realized how rash I was. I hadn't quit my job, I hadn't canceled my lease, and I needed to get a new SIM card. And more importantly, I needed to figure out where to go. I finished my resignation letter, found my ID, and went to get a new SIM card. As soon as I got outside, I saw Ethan. He looked at me, very calm. He was always like that. It was like nothing really fazed him. Did it really have to come to this? He asked. You saw what I posted online, didn't you? I said. Why else would he be at my apartment when he was supposed to be working? So, what do you think? You and your intern were just friends, right? But what do you see from a girlfriend's perspective? Do you think what you did was wrong? I asked him. He was silent for a while. She's very gifted. She has the potential to be an amazing doctor. She could do a lot of good for many people. So, I always try to help her when I can. I slapped him across the face. I'd felt a little bad before about ruining his career. But now I could see how I had been a fool. Ethan had probably never been hit in his life. I stared at his red cheek and chuckled. I hated him. Don't ever bother me again, Ethan, I said. You are just disgusting. I ran away, found a phone store, and got a new SIM card. After sending my resignation letter, I spent the afternoon doing research, deciding to go to Y City. I wanted to go north, but it was too difficult to ship Lucky. Even if he acted tough, he was terrified, and I knew that he would be miserable if I left him behind. I had spent a lot of my savings in a city. I had some money left for food and for the road. The rest I had tucked away. I wanted to make some money so I could buy a car and travel with Lucky everywhere. Kyle found out I had quit, and he came over right away. I couldn't deal with it, so I said, if you're going to convince me to stay, then just leave. I don't do second chances. He petted Lucky and took out a toy for him. Then, he stood up. I just came to see you. I saw the news. You've been through a lot. I thought that it would be better if you had some company, he added. My eyes started to burn. It's not a big deal, I said. Kyle was very sensitive and attentive. After Kyle and I made up, I asked him why he had been such a jerk to me in high school. I thought he was going to say he was trying to get revenge or something. Instead, he told me that he had seen me putting up ads with tape. My sneakers were coming apart. And then, he saw me eating a meal with duck legs. When I was halfway through, I'd packed it away. He thought I was poor. I had rolled my eyes. Sneakers falling apart aren't that bad. It's normal when you wear them for a while. And the reason I packed the other half of my dinner was because I was on a diet. I was stressed and hungry in high school, so I ate a lot. Then, I wanted to lose weight in college, and I was too lazy to work out, so I just ate less. Then, I got used to it. Plus, the restaurant food is too oily, so I packed the other half and reheated it at night. I was doing my part for the environment and saving money. And that made him think I was broke? Okay, I did try to save money. I wanted to have my own apartment and my own dog. That was my way of breaking free from my family. I'd always wanted to have a pet, but my mom didn't let me. Once, I begged my dad to get me a tabby cat. After 2 months, my mom was annoyed, so she threw it into a bag and dumped it far away. I was crying, and all she did was slap me. I was never allowed to have pets again, but I loved them so much. In college, there were a lot of cats and dogs. I loved petting those Goldens, Alaskans, Samoyeds. I decided then that I'd have my own home and my own dog. I worked hard in college, did a part-time job, got some scholarships. I saved up $30,000. As soon as I started work, I got lucky. We lived in a cheap apartment without AC. But the cost of housing was so high that I could not afford a new place. Kyle insisted on taking me and Lucky to the beach. He even brought Lucky a ball for fetch. I told Kyle how I hated my mom's actions. Once I let go of my filial obligation, I started to feel better. Kyle said that if my mom wanted a son-in-law, there were many other options out there. A 985 college graduate, from a single-parent family, but his dad was super rich. He went on and on. I said, Kyle, I don't think I'll be ready for a relationship for a few years. The distance between Ethan and I had felt so great, and even though I pushed myself to try and catch up, I ultimately failed. I knew that Kyle liked me, but I couldn't reciprocate. He was wonderful, and he deserved better. Kyle was silent for a bit, then he hugged Lucky tight. You need to tell me where you are going, okay? Lucky loves me so much, you can't keep him away from me. Lucky started to howl, like he was saying, I love him. Mom. I just looked away, and Lucky started to fake cry. Kyle started fake crying too. They were so cute together, that I looked like I was stopping them from having a good life. I rolled my eyes. In your dreams. But I was so wrong. I moved to Y City. At first things were okay. After a month, Lucky started pestering me for Kyle. He would take all the things that Kyle gave him and act cute. I tried to talk to him, but he wouldn't listen. He just made a big scene and wouldn't eat or drink anything. I was going to leave him to it, but when I was cleaning his mess, I realized that the gold chain that Kyle had bought him was real gold. I took it to a pawn shop. It was real. I called Kyle and yelled at him. I told him I was going to return the gold. He told me to return it and see if my delivery gets stolen. Was I supposed to be okay with that? Of course not. So when he came, he had a silly smile on his face, and he brought Lucky a roast duck. A famous roast duck. A Michelin-recommended roast duck that cost $300. I never had any of it. They spent the afternoon cuddling. Lucky wouldn't leave Kyle's lap. I watched them and felt like my heart was going to break. It's no wonder people steal pets after a breakup. It's impossible to deal with the pain. Kyle was petting Lucky and stared at me. His eyes shined. Can I come and see him? Take that gold chain with you. Are you going to move again? Take that gold chain with you. You should tell me if you move again. See? Lucky can't live without me. I flipped out. Why are you so annoying? You know where I live now, so you can just come over, and if I move, can't you just call me? I was so mad. I hid in my room. Stupid dog. You're mine. I had raised him. I felt angry and needed to use the bathroom. I held it in for a bit. Then, as I was about to open my door, I saw Kyle cutting Lucky's nails. He was saying, Lucky, your mom works hard to support you, so you should be a good dog. Don't make her angry, okay? I will try to be your stepfather, then I can take you on rides around the neighborhood. I rolled my eyes. I knew what Kyle's intention had been when he had been so nice to Lucky. It seemed that he was succeeding. 6 months later, Kyle moved to Y City so he could walk Lucky easily. He rented the apartment opposite of mine. He insisted that I take Lucky over to celebrate. He was cooking and Lucky was busy begging for food. It was such a happy sight. I sat on the couch, looking at the bright sky. I need to get a scooter, I thought. And that's how I got my happy ending.